Hello everyone, my name is Ann Marie Beale and I'm the minister at Unity Church of the Cumberlands in Cookeville, Tennessee. You know, when I was growing up I was a little different from my family and others around me. I believed different things, I thought different, I acted different. Do any of you feel that way? A lot of New Thought people say that. Well, today we're going to look at an Egyptian pharaoh who was different. He was an enlightened pharaoh before his time, before the consciousness of humankind was able to accept that. Last week we started a series of looking at different philosophies and religions from around the world. And we started with Zoroaster in Persia. Today we're moving to Egypt, 1388 BC to 1335 BC. 1388 to 1335 BC, where the pyramids are, the mysterious pyramids. Now, long before Jesus, long before Buddha, before Lao Tzu in China, there was Akhenaten. But he was born with the name Amenhotep IV, from a family line of pharaohs, and he eventually changed his name to Akhenaten. He was really more of a mystic than a politician. As a matter of fact, they said of him that his heart overflowed with love. And they called him the Lord of Breath of Sweetness. Oh my goodness, you know you're in trouble then. Can you imagine someone that loving surviving as a politician? Well, he was also physically a very unlikely figure. He was pale and sickly looking. His body was elongated, and his head was huge and had that dome-shaped skull that you sometimes see in museums. And many people believe he had a disease called Marfan syndrome. Other people believe and insist that he was an ET, an extraterrestrial. I say it could be a little bit of both. He certainly had visions and dreams that were out of this world from the people of the time. Now, you may not remember him, but you certainly probably have heard of his wife, Nefertiti. She was known as the most beautiful woman in the world. And you can compare her to other first ladies who were beautiful, like Jacqueline Kennedy or Michelle Obama. It's tough to compete with beauty and fashion, isn't it? They had 7 daughters, no sons to carry on the family line of pharaohs. But he was very devoted to his family. He was a real family man. As a matter of fact, he scandalized the art world. Back then, when they did a portrait of your picture, if you were a pharaoh, they made you look very regal, almost like a god, above everyone else. But Akhenaten insisted that when they did his portrait, they did him in ordinary domestic scenes with his wife and his children. He became a pharaoh at a very young age when his father died when he was 13. Because he was so young, his mother Tai ruled the land until he became 17 or 18, and then he became the official pharaoh and priest of the area. Back then, the priest and pharaoh were the same. He went on to rule for 17 years. And really, when you think about it, that's not bad for a mystic to be able to survive for 17 years. You see, he was so enlightened. He saw God as one, that we were one with God, one with each other, very much like we believe in unity. When we talked about Zoroaster, the symbol that people associate with him are the winged globe, the big wings. With Akhenaten, the symbol that he is associated with is the sun. God is the sun and all the rays going out from the sun, and we are each a ray of the sun. If you receive our newsletter, you will find that picture in this week's newsletter. Now, he was able to see the truth back then in the corruption of the priesthood. Priesthood was big money back then. It was a profitable business. They worshipped a lot of gods, and they had a lot of statues to sell, one for each god. They made a lot of money. The more gods you had, the more statues you sold. Here he came along and said there is only one God. Well, he put them out of business, didn't he? And he disturbed the status quo and made a lot of enemies within his country. He was a real pacifist. He had the feeling, like all the pacifists did back in the 60s, make love, not war. And to his credit and his downfall, he did not build a strong army because he didn't believe in war. So he had enemies both within and out that eventually led to his downfall. The world was no more ready for the law of love than it is today. His enemies, after he died, destroyed any evidence that he had ever existed. They destroyed the statues and the artwork, the paintings, the writings, so that his spiritual beliefs of one God could be destroyed along with him. There's an age-old argument amongst all enlightened beings. If there's a war, do we fight or do we pray? If you remember the movie Mission, it was about a South American native tribe that made violins, and they were such a peaceful, loving tribe of people. They were invaded, and they were being slaughtered. And there were two priests in the movie. One was a pacifist, and the other said, we've got to fight and protect our people. Well, they all died. It didn't matter. And at the end of the movie, you were left with the belief, do we fight or do we not? Ecclesiastes tells us there's a time for peace and a time for war, until mankind can learn to live the law of love. Charles Potter, in the book The History of Religion, talks about Akhenaten. He was the first pacifist, the first realist, the first monotheist, the first Democrat, the first heretic, the first humanitarian, the first internationalist, and the first person known to found a religion. But he was born out of his time, several thousand years too soon. Manly P. Hall, in his book, says, here in the shadow of great stone temples was born the doctrine of the true Aten, the universal God, a doctrine of such profundity that it has moved scholars to say that Akhenaten was the first enlightened man of recorded history. Manly P. Hall goes on to say, for the first time in history, 3,000 years ago, a government was founded on the principle of love. It was not his principles, but the lack of principles in his enemies that destroyed him. Oh, I love that last line. It was not his principles, but the lack of principles in his enemies that eventually destroyed him and killed him. Throughout the history of mankind, enlightened ones are not always accepted, and it takes great courage to come into this world enlightened. Bringers of light will not always be accepted. It's not their job to be accepted. It's their job to plant the seeds of enlightenment that will eventually bloom and blossom when it's time. Like Jesus and Akhenaten, like Buddha, Muhammad, Krishna, Zoroaster, we could go on, masters throughout time have planted these seeds in humanity. In the newsletter, again, there is that drawing of the divine presence extending itself as us. And we are one with source and substance to sustain us, whatever is needed, be it strength, guidance, whatever we need is provided for through the all-sufficiency of the divine presence. Unity's minister, Rev Eric Butterworth, once said, we are an inlet and an outlet of all there is in God. Let's make that into an I am affirmation. I am an inlet and an outlet of all there is in God. I am an inlet and an outlet of all there is in the divine presence, whatever you call that presence. And then we extend ourselves to others after divine love has extended itself as us. Then we extend love to others. We extend loving service. We extend as our creativity through our talents and abilities. And we extend in bearing children and our offspring. But there's often times when we don't do things because we forget that we are one with the source and substance. We believe we're separate and that we're lacking somehow, that we're inadequate or not capable, that we can't do it. If you believe that, listen to this. There's a fun and humorous reading that shows the humanness of all the people in the Bible and how human they were and what they did in spite of it. Listen to these biblical characters who felt inadequate for the job. Noah was a drunk. Abraham was too old. Isaac was a daydreamer. Jacob was a liar. Leah was ugly. Joseph was abused by bullies. Moses had a stuttering problem. Gideon was afraid. Rahab was a prostitute. Jeremiah was a whiner. Oh, did he know how to whine? Timothy was too young. David had an affair with a married woman and murdered her husband. Elijah was suicidal. Isaiah preached naked. David danced down the street naked. There was a lot of nakedness in the Bible. Jonah ran from God. Naomi was a widow. Job went bankrupt. John the Baptist ate bugs, locusts, oh my God. Peter denied Jesus. The disciples fell asleep while praying. Martha was worried and obsessive. The Samaritan woman divorced 5 husbands. Zacchaeus was too small. He was short like me. Paul was a religious fanatic. Timothy had an ulcer and Lazarus was dead. Look at what they accomplished and think of what we can accomplish when we know our union with the divine presence. Now for a moment before we close, I'd like you to visualize the tomb, the mummy of Akhenaten. There's a prayer inscribed, golden foil beneath his feet. It says, remember the Lord of breath, of sweetness. And it loses something in translation. The prayer, I breathe the sweet breath which comes forth from thy mouth. I behold thy beauty every day. It is my desire that I may hear the sweet voice, even the north wind, that my limbs may be rejuvenated with life through the love of thee. Give me thy hands holding thy spirit, that I may receive it and be lifted by it. Call thou upon my name into eternity, and it shall never fail. Today I invite you to join us on Zoom at 11:30 to share what this means to you. Today's music will be provided by Michael and the Native American flute. But first, let's do our love offering like we do every Sunday when we're together. And I thank all of you who continue to support Unity Church of the Cumberlands during this time of quarantine. If you would like to donate, go on our website, unitycookville.org, and click on the donate button. It will tell you how to do it. Or you can send your check to 823 East 10th Street, Cookeville, Tennessee, 38501. And now let's do our blessing together. Divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. And I am grateful. And now I'm grateful for Michael. to be different. Let us dare to release those old paradigms of fear and separation. Let us live the life of an enlightened awareness of our oneness with Source and substance. We go boldly, with courage into the world, living the light that we are, extending loving service to each other, living out our creativity, our talents, our abilities. And we allow that growing awareness, like a seed that is planted, to grow and blossom and bloom within us. And now we allow the music to take us deeper into that awareness, into that knowing of the truth that sets us free.